Welcome everybody to the Sierra Fund's Lunch and Learn series. I'm so glad you could make it. My name is Greg Thrush and I work at the Sierra Fund as a community organizer. Today I want to talk about disadvantaged communities and what the Sierra Fund's community outreach efforts look like in Nevada County. Nevada County is home for many people, and as with many places, it has unique environmental and social issues. As many of you probably know who are familiar with the Sierra Fund, our mission works to confront the legacy of impacts from 19th century gold rush that persists to this day in our region. The gold rush that began in the 1850s caused incredible upheaval in this area. Within the span of 2 generations, it witnessed the genocide of the first people here, along with enormous environmental devastation. And we continue to deal with the human and environmental impacts of the gold rush today. The Nevadan descendants continue to live here without any federal recognition that they are a tribe with ancestral rights. Gold mining as an economic motor was eventually eclipsed by logging, which was then eclipsed by a population boom to make contemporary Nevada County what it is today. But despite that, Nevada County's mining history continues to manifest in tangible ways. Some examples are, for example, significant pieces of our current water infrastructure rely on the flumes and ditches that were built to power the mines in the 19th century to this day. Mercury, which was used to amalgamate gold, still lies in abandoned mine sites and continues to move into our waterways and enters into the food web, ending up in the fish we eat. There are thousands of abandoned mines in and around our towns that contain toxic substances. Many, if not most of them, have had no remediation efforts made to fix that situation. In work and recreation, residents in Nevada County are exposed to heavy metals from dust around abandoned mine sites, whether we're aware of it or not. Nevada County has historically been a working class community based on traditional economic models, and responding to changing economic realities is not always easy or available to everyone in our area. So as we begin to understand how the region's past impacts us today, the question is, what needs to be done now and how do we do it? The Sierra Fund is committed to restore ecosystem and community resiliency with an eye towards how this resiliency can be promoted and protected into the future. And central to the Sierra Fund's mission is a commitment to social and environmental justice. This means that we make efforts to understand what are the issues and needs of as many people as possible and try to address them. So I want to talk about disadvantaged communities today, and DACs, as I refer to them. DAC communities refer to areas throughout California which are mostly impacted by a combination of economic, health, and environmental burdens. And I am going to refer to them as DACs just because it's easier. It's a nice shorthand. So when I say DACs, you know I mean disadvantaged communities. And there are multiple ways to think about and define DACs. The primary one is an economic marker. A community is considered DAC if the median household income is less than 80% of the state level. And so, for example, in the 2018 data, which is the latest we have, California median household income was a little more than $75,000. Same data for Nevada County, median household income was a little more than $63,000. So about 84% of the state level, which is a little above DAC status. Grass Valley, the median household income in 2018 was a little more than $35,000. So significantly lower than the state level, about 47% of the state median household income. So, you know, we live in an area that has a great diversity of economic power. And so that's one way to think about it in just pure economic terms. There's another way to think about it as a disparity in access to resources and opportunities. Some examples of this are educational and employment opportunities are fairly limited in Nevada County compared to other places in California. And Nevada County has limited medical services and professionals. I don't know if anybody has tried to find a primary care physician recently, but it's pretty difficult to do. And we have a significant aging population, which impacts our need for medical services and care. Another way to think about DACs is isolation. Rural communities are less concentrated and oftentimes can be on their own to solve problems with a small financial base. Communities like the town of Washington are a good example. They have a very small population. They have their own small water system, and they are struggling, and it's aging, and the infrastructure needs upgrading. And they don't really know how to do it because the number of people the size of their communities doesn't give them enough economic wherewithal to fix the problem on their own. So they are seeking help through regional entities, which I will talk about a little further along. DACs also can also typically be underrepresented groups that are at the margin of decision making. So low-income families, Spanish speakers, and tribes are some examples of that. There are characteristics of DACs. DAC designation can both be collective and individual. So for example, here in Grass Valley, I live in downtown Grass Valley. I may personally make more than the median household income in this area, but that means that my neighbors are probably making less than me. And collectively, we are a poor community, whether we individually are or not. And lower income means less economic power. We have a smaller tax base, and we live in a town that's one of the first towns in California, and we have a decaying infrastructure that needs fixing. How do we do that? So, there are many ways to think of DACs, but they do have unique issues, or we as DACs have unique issues, but we don't necessarily see ourselves as unique. And so it does require some special outreach strategies. And, so what I think about a lot is how do we get everyone's thinking and creativity to work for the community and get people involved? So a key to working in a DAC community is outreach to as diverse a group of stakeholders as possible. And if any of you have seen any of our other Lunch and Learns or other presentations we've done, this is a diagram that sort of lays out our strategy to unite all of our programmatic work. And it's our theory of change, and it pivots on two axes, investment and resiliency. So there's kind of in this chart, you see resiliency on one axis and investment on the other. In this is kind of an understanding that as you increase investment in the Sierra Nevada region, whether that's monetary, intellectual, and otherwise, say research or education, technology, or community capacity, you increase the resiliency or the ability of the region to respond and adapt to change, both at the ecosystem level and at the community level. And so this arc that you can see, this arrow of our deliberate approach, starts on the ground where we live with a 360-degree view of the problem. And we're always listening and trying to adjust how we work. It's a constant iterative process. And for my work, that 360-degree understanding is talking to as many people as possible, finding out what the issues are, what's important to them, and what they're thinking. Then engaging problem solvers. So obviously the people I talk with, they understand their experiences better than anyone, and they can identify the issues that are going on for them and oftentimes in the community around them. But not everybody knows how to make changes happen. And so that's part of doing community outreach, is to engage with people and have conversations, and solutions can emerge from conversations. I'm going to address 4 projects that we do further on in this talk. Posting fish advisories, outreach to Spanish speakers, fire preparedness and DACs, and also the DAC involvement process to update the CABI plan, which I'll explain later. And so then, the know better, do better. This is basically finding the best thinkers and the best ideas that we can and that help us refine our work and our outreach. And then ultimately, what we try to do is make pilot plans that help implement these ideas. And ultimately, what we try to do is sustain the change. And this, in my instance, is there a shift in institutions or processes that ensure that the solutions that are coming out of conversations and are being tried actually address the issues and make these changes institutionalized? Is there accountability? Is there transparency? Are these changes assured to continue? That kind of thing. So how does this change model theory get used in my work? Well, I'm a community organizer, as I mentioned, and here's me doing my work. A core idea of community organizing is to identify and engage more diverse stakeholders in decisions and to make sure that the work that the Sierra Fund does addresses the issues of the most number of people as possible. The Sierra Fund's vision for improving community resiliency focuses on environmental justice, as I mentioned earlier, making sure that all people who live and work in the Sierra Nevada have the tools they need to protect themselves and their families from exposure to legacy mining toxics, and to participate in decisions about future access to clean water, air, soil, food. And vital to the tenets of environmental justice is that the crucial, important leadership role that must be played by people who live near these environmentally affected and toxic landscapes, especially those who are economically disadvantaged or underrepresented. So how people perceive and engage in environment issues that are around them? Well, many people don't for a variety of reasons. And these reasons are important. Some of the reasons are that people have other priorities that take precedence. I mean, a lot of people, are low income and are working 2 jobs and have families life is full. And so environmental issues aren't necessarily on the top of their list of things that are important to them or that they have time to think about and pay attention to. A lot of people are just too busy to be involved. They've got families and work and other obligations that keep them pretty busy. Another reason are, there's just not necessarily an awareness of what the issues are. And so, for example, if the Sierra Fund wants to increase the amount and accessibility of information on exposure to mining toxics to greater numbers of people who might traditionally not receive these messages, how do we do that? What's the process? And community organizing and outreach is one way to do that. So as a community organizer, I make extra efforts to engage people who the Sierra Fund doesn't normally encounter in our daily work. And it requires a stretch, but that's what community organizing is, and it's super interesting. So this has been pretty abstract. So let me talk about some specific projects and campaigns that the Sierra Fund is working on that I'm involved in. So I'm going to talk about 4, as I mentioned before. I'm going to talk about mercury in fish and consumption advisories for anglers. I'm going to talk about services and information to Spanish speakers. I'm going to talk about fire preparedness in DAC communities. And I'm going to talk about the DAC involvement process in CABI. And I'll explain what that is. CABI is our integrated regional water management group in the area that Nevada County is part of. So let me start with fish consumption advisories. So as most of you probably know, and I mentioned earlier, mercury is in the headwaters and it makes its way into fish tissue. I won't go into explaining how, but it does. And the fish that are high in mercury are prevalent in this area. So the primary public health exposure to mercury is from fish consumption. And a while back, when we realized this, the Sierra Fund conducted an angler surveys to find out who was eating fish and how much. And one of the findings from the survey was that people actually do engage in sustenance fishing. And for some, it's an economical way to feed the family. For others, it's just a pleasure because fish are delicious and we have an abundance of them in our area. But at the time, no information was available at the water bodies to explain about mercury in fish and about healthy consumption limits for different kinds of fish. So starting in 2015, the Sierra Fund began Post-it Day. And it was an effort to get volunteers to help post fish consumption advisories that were produced by OEHA, which is our State Office of Environmental Health and Hazards Assessment, to post the information that they had collected, scientifically collected, analyzed, and produced to places where it was needed, so where people fished. And over the years, we've continued to do this, and it has evolved. We realized that the next step was that women and children really needed to be educated about the differences between them and other adults, males and other adults, in terms of fish consumption. The next year, we realized Spanish speakers also needed to have access to this information. So we started posting bilingual. And it has evolved over time. Last year, the Sierra Fund took part in trying to get and successfully getting AB 762 to pass in the legislature. And AB 762 is some legislation that mandates the posting of fish consumption advisories on water bodies that have specific advisories for them. And so we have now shifted to try to work with water body managers to extend the fish consumption advisory work that we've done, to let them take it on themselves. And we're helping them in that process, and providing them with materials and whatever assistance they need to make that happen. This year, we have started also to extend our fish consumption advisory work into Yuba County, and hopefully eventually into Sierra counties as well. Another project that I've been working on and Sierra Fund has been interested in for a long time has been our Spanish-speaking community here. So much information at the Sierra Fund has been developed, but it is really inaccessible to many people who might benefit from it because it was written in English. And in our area, Nevada County, roughly 1 in 10 people speak Spanish. And so translating materials is one of the first things that happened after I began working at the Sierra Fund. And then after we translated them, distributing and presenting that information became something that we worked on. And I started making presentations on environmental issues at apartment complexes, mobile home parks, and started cultivating contacts with Spanish speakers in the area through community organizations and personal networks, and however way I could. Another thing that we recognized was that it just wasn't our own publications, but our public agencies also had important information and communications that were essential to our Spanish-speaking communities, and that it was super important to get their messages out as broadly as possible in more than one language. And so working with the county, we encouraged them and consulted with them to make sure that emergency services and materials became available in Spanish to Spanish speakers in the county. And starting in February of this year, the Code Red, which is our emergency notification system, is now in Spanish and English. And we worked with the county to put together their Ready, Set, Go manual in Spanish as well. And I have been working to get that distributed amongst the Spanish-speaking community in this area. Fire preparedness. So, as everyone is aware, climate change, a lack of comprehensive forest and landscape management, combined with a growing population in its wild-urban interface here, makes Nevada County one of the places in California at highest risk for wildfires. And it's an awareness that has been growing slowly, but in the last 2 or 3 years has blossomed partially as a result of the tragic fires that have occurred in our areas, notably Camp Fire in Paradise. But so as a consequence, it was a wake-up call to many of us, and the Sierra Fund has joined with many others to think about this problem in our area. It's obviously complex, and the thinking is constantly evolving, and the Sierra Fund spends a lot of time listening to knowledgeable people who are working on the immediate needs of our community with regards to fire preparedness. We also participated in community groups that have sprung up to address the issues of living in a wild urban interface. The Coalition of Firewise Communities and the Nevada County Fire Safe Council are two fabulous groups that work together to help neighborhoods get ready for the possibility of fire in our area. And as we absorb information and can help understand the problem better, the Sierra Fund makes efforts to make sure that all communities, including DAC communities, are part of this process, and that their concerns are heard, that the information is communicated to them clearly, and that the issues that they have are understood and taken into consideration by local and state decision makers. So the DAC involvement process, I said I would explain it, so let me do that right now. So the Sierra Nevada region has a crucial role as part of the headwaters of California, and we supply 60% of the state's water. A lot of decisions are made about water quality and access in this region, but there was traditionally no coordination of that. And so to address this issue, integrated regional water management entities were created to help work across boundaries and to address the complex interplay of interests that occur around water. Nevada County is part of the Consumnes American Bear Yuba Integrated Regional Water Management Entity, and it goes by the acronym CABI, which stands for Consumnes American Bear Yuba. The Sierra Fund was part of CABI's inception and has played a role in developing its plan through the years that it's existed. And this plan spells out the priorities and projects which receive funding from state bond measures that are administered through the California Department of Water Resources. Early on, the Sierra Fund helped the Department of Water Resources draw attention to a glaring gap in the IRMs, which was a lack of DAC and tribal inclusion in the planning and decision-making process. And so, we were quite vocal about this, and the Department of Water Resources heard this and changed some thinking. And with the Department of Water Resources mandate, CABI underwent an extensive process to involve DAC communities and tribes around the region in this process to develop and make sure that the plan that CABI created was heard and listening to the needs of the communities that were not typically heard. So the Sierra Fund worked to identify and involve representatives from the various communities in Nevada County to participate in this process as consultants. And it was a pretty long, involved process that was aided by the Sierra Institute, who was contracted to do and to organize all of these consultations. And the results of their study and this whole DAC inclusion process were included in the most recent CABI plan. And as a part of this process, the Sierra Fund worked with these communities to develop water projects and lay them out in ways that they could submit to CABI for inclusion into the plan to be considered for funding. And so that is kind of just a little sampler of the kind of work that was being done. And I want to talk next about kind of some lessons learned that I have learned doing the work of working in DAC communities and doing community organizing there. community community organizing is not a straight path. It's adaptive, it's iterative process, and sometimes you need to pivot. As an example, when I started working for the Sierra Fund, we were focusing on water quality and access issues as part of the DAC process. And as I was talking to people about it, I kept hearing that water was important, but fire was what people were really thinking about and concerned about. And so I kept hearing it over and over again. And it's like, all right. So I went back to the Sierra Fund and I said, so, people are talking about fire, and I think we need to start thinking about this. And people started talking about it within the Sierra Fund, and we realized, yes, it was an integral part of the work that we need to be doing. And so we started working on it and started coming up with how the work that we do integrates with fire preparedness, and our work continues to develop. Another thing that lesson learned is that outreach requires cultivating relationships, and trust takes time. So I spend as much time as I possibly can. It's getting more difficult in the COVID era, but I spend as much time as I can out in the world talking to people and finding out what's going on with them. People have different levels of interest and engagement around environmental work and the work that the Sierra Fund does, but most people do care about the environment and understand that it adds to their lives. And everyone, at minimum, appreciates being kept informed and consulted. So, if I was to tell another group or person how to do outreach, what would I tell them? I think I would say care about and be interested in the people you talk with. Educate through conversations. Understand what people think about what you're telling them. Like, ground truthing. Does this make sense? Is this part of, is this reality for people? And after you talk to people, come back with responses to the issues and questions that arose during the conversation. And of course, also share your vision. So the Sierra Fund has a very clear mission and vision. And whenever I talk to people, I try to make sure that that vision is clearly communicated and understood. So what's next for the Sierra Fund and for me? So if you look at the screen, it looks a little strange. You'll see a little picture of me in kind of the middle. That's me on a Zoom meeting. We're trying to figure out how to do community outreach during the pandemic. It is challenging and kind of interesting, and fairly successful so far. It's taken a while to figure out how to do it. But for example, last week, the Sierra Fund hosted a presentation that we shared with the Office of Emergency Services, Nevada County Consolidated Fire, Nevada County Sheriffs, the Freed Center for Independent Living, and we did a presentation geared specifically for mobile home park residents to try to address some of the issues related to fire preparedness that are specific to them. And we hope to continue doing these online workshops and meetings and presentations. And it has some really amazing benefits that we're coming to discover. For one, it gives access to decision makers and community leaders that is quite democratic and quite direct. In this example of last week's presentation, people got to talk directly to the Office of Emergency Services program manager and tell them what their issues were, and to the fire department. And they heard it, and they had quite interesting responses to these questions. And it was a way for people to talk to people directly. And it was quite energizing, honestly. So that's going on. Some other things that the Sierra Fund is working on are some new initiatives related to air quality. Kind of realized that wildfire has many impacts. Of course, there's the possibility of a conflagration in our immediate area, but more generally, wildfires are going to happen in the region, and it's going to impact us regardless of whether it happens immediately in our communities. And we need to think about that. So we have been working on a cleaner air strategy to increase community resilience in the face of regional wildfires and smoke. And we are also developing more our work about dusty exposures. It's work that we started a while back, but we're kind of re-engaging with it and developing it more. And we want to expand this work to educate and learn more about people who do outdoor work for a living and people who recreate in the Sierra Nevada, and how to get the appropriate information to them about what they need to know to be safe and healthy and enjoy their world out there. So that's about it for me and my presentation. I want to thank the people that help the Sierra Fund do this work and my work within the Sierra Fund. That would be, at the moment, the Sierra Health Foundation, the California EPA, the Mead Foundation, the True North Foundation, Heller Foundation, the California Department of Resources. Thank you very much. We are very passionate about what we do, and it's very gratifying and confirming to have foundations like the ones I mentioned and the state support our work. So with that, I want to say thank you, and I want to invite you all to join us, help us make the Sierra Nevadan communities vibrant and healthy. Many of you have, but please continue, propose ideas for your neighborhood and our community, help us advocate for environmental health for all of us, and support responsible legislation that helps make the Sierra Nevada continue to be a place we want to all live. And so with that, I want to say that the Lunch and Learn series is drawing to a conclusion. All of these are posted on our website or will be. And so please take a look. We've had a variety of super interesting presentations done by members of our staff. And I will be presenting next week again on wildfire and air quality in the Sierra Nevada. And then Martin will conclude the series with a talk about her work doing advocacy in the Capitol for the Sierra, for our area. As I said, each presentation is available on our website, or will be, and we invite you to take a look at it and learn about what we're doing. So with that, I want to say again, thank you. So glad you joined us. I can be contacted here with my email address, as are other people at the Sierra Fund. We're available and interested in talking with everyone. So please stay in touch with us. And with that, I'll conclude the presentation. Jenny, let's turn off the recording, and I'll open it up for questions if anybody has.